Hello and welcome to It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Joining me today is Duane Bratt, who is a political science professor at Mount Royal University in Calgary. Thanks for joining us today, Duane.
Good afternoon, Mario.
Well, lots going on in the world of politics these days. Let's talk about a few topics. And first one, of course, is the U.S. election. I guess it's about 3 weeks away now. What's your gut feeling on the outcome of that?
I think Joe Biden will win if there's no disturbances, if there's no extra sort of element around court cases or blocking of elections or invalidating ballots. And the reason I say that is successive polls have shown anywhere from an 8 to 12 point lead for Biden, including in many battleground states. And that gap has been relatively the same throughout multiple months. This isn't 2016, where there were times that Trump was ahead and then times that Clinton took a big lead. This has been largely stable. When you break it down by state, the three, what is called the blue wall, that Trump breached in 2016 allowed him to win the three Midwestern states of Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Biden is leading in all of them, handily in Michigan, smaller in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, but more significantly, states that Trump won, and in some cases handily, he's in jeopardy of losing. Arizona, Florida, North Carolina, Iowa. So I think, with less than 3 weeks to go, it's going to be a Joe Biden victory. But there's extra elements here. You're talking about the mail-in voting, and Trump has been talking for months that this is corrupt. Now, whether he is setting the stage for explaining why he lost, which is a possibility, or we could see greater intervention by Trump and his allies. He's looking for poll watchers, that could be armed or at least intimidating. You're looking at voter suppression. There are places in Georgia where they're in line for 7-8 hours.
Wow.
So it could be really dicey. Not just the night of November 3rd, and it's doubtful that we will see a result on November 3rd, but in the days to come. What happens if Trump has a narrow lead on November 3rd before the mail-in ballots occur, and he declares victory on Twitter? What's the response then? So if everything was on the up and up, I think we're looking at a Biden victory and perhaps even a Biden landslide. But things aren't necessarily going to be on the up and up, which is why stay tuned.
Of course, recently the biggest news was Trump's testing positive for COVID. What impact do you think that will have on things?
So I thought initially it was going to have an impact on the campaigning. It really didn't. He was out of the loop for a couple days. They had to cancel the debate, but then they rescheduled a series of town halls last night. So it really didn't affect the campaign style so much, but what it did was put the attention back on coronavirus. Trump doesn't want to talk about coronavirus. He wants to talk about everything else. And I can give you about 220,000 reasons why he doesn't want to talk about the coronavirus. But as soon as he caught it, which then led to multiple members of the White House staff, cabinet secretaries, his wife, his child, catching it, it put the attention full scale. And we saw that again last night in those dueling town halls. Joe Biden admitted he wasn't talking about masks or social distancing until late March. But Trump, here we are in middle October, is still criticizing masks.
Yeah.
So I think a lot, and the numbers are showing it, that his unwillingness to actively respond to the coronavirus crisis has contributed to many more deaths in the United States than they should have had.
Okay, let's switch gears and talk about Canada now, federal politics. You obviously follow all the polls that are out there. Yep. And sentiment. What do you think the sentiment is in Canada right now for Justin Trudeau and how he is handling the economy and how he is handling the virus?
I think he, like almost every politician, with the exception of Donald Trump and Jason Kenney here in Alberta, and I think there's some reasons for Kenney, and I've already mentioned the reasons for Trump, but every other major politician in Canada has received what we call a COVID bump, an increase in support. This is why Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick went to the polls early. This is why John Horgan is going to the polls early. And Scott Moe in Saskatchewan, he's likely to be reelected as well. So there has been a COVID bump. I think there is going to be a reckoning about the massive deficit that we have accumulated in this process. But I think by and large, most people have accepted not just the health measures, but the economic bailout measures. There was a dip in the summer as a result of the WE scandal. And I think the WE scandal is important. It did lead to the resignation of the finance minister, Bill Morneau. I think there may be more dominoes to fall there. But when Trudeau prorogued Parliament, he was able to kind of not reset his government, but distance himself from the WE scandal. It's starting to appear again, but we'll see if it can make traction. And so we've seen this pattern with Trudeau before. You know, he wins a majority government in 2015, and then he goes to the Aga Khan Island and gets an ethics blow. Then he recovers from that. He looks like he's on the verge of a majority government in 2019, and then he gets bogged down in the SNC-Lavalin scandal that takes him from a majority to a minority. Then he's in real trouble after the election. He's got no seats between Winnipeg and Vancouver. His brand has been damaged. And then COVID kicks in and he starts to get support again by Canadians on how he's handling it. And then in the midst of all that, he throws himself in the WE scandal. It's almost like he can't help himself. So stay tuned on that. I think Erin O'Toole, the new Conservative leader, will be formidable, much more formidable than Andrew Scheer. And that could be a very tight race. I don't think anyone wants an election now. I think it's tough enough to have an election in BC in the middle of a pandemic. Trying to win a nationwide election would be even more difficult, which is why I think no one really wants an election, but I expect to see one in the spring. And then let's see what happens there.
Okay, super. Let's turn to provincial politics. You mentioned Jason Kenney, the premier. How do you think his approval rating is these days with people?
He's taken a real hit. He was up 20 points in the election in 2019 over the NDP, and here we are, year and a half later, and he either is tied with the NDP or has a narrow lead of the NDP. And unlike all the other leaders I mentioned in Canada, he did not receive that COVID bump. I think there's an acknowledgement, and the polls have shown that much of what he has done from a health perspective, from an economic perspective, they support. But at the same time, he's been having this fight over healthcare, fighting with doctors, fighting with nurses. This week, he announced 11,000 outsourcing jobs in Alberta Health Services. And I think that is what has hurt him, particularly in rural Alberta. But where he's bleeding support isn't to the NDP. The NDP has gone up a little bit, but it's been to a string of more far-right separatist parties in Alberta. So Kenney's government is being pushed from two directions, sort of the NDP and the centrists who are upset with his fights with doctors, fights over parks, some other stuff, and then a group that's saying you're not fighting Trudeau hard enough. And so this is why I think he's been in a difficult position, and why his popularity has not only not increased like John Horgan or Justin Trudeau or even Doug Ford, but has in fact dropped.
Okay, speaking of dropping popularity, let's talk local civic politics. We're about a year away from the next municipal election. First of all, what do you think the current mayor's popularity stands ahead of Nenshi?
I think all the councillors have taken a hit in popularity, and it's for a number of reasons, but almost all economic reasons. The economy really has been stagnated since 2015. There's been tax fights. The population is really restless. And most of that ire, I think, is directed at the mayor. It is a year out. We do not know if he's running for re-election, but he's been in power for 10 years. That's a very long time. He had a bruising battle in 2017, and I think if he stays in and runs again, it will be another bruising battle for him. We've also seen moves by the provincial government to support challengers. The incumbents in a municipal race have huge advantages, which is why they're almost always re-elected. We only tend to see competitive races when the seat's open. But by changing some of the funding rules, it allows for challengers easier access. I think the provincial government is putting on a series of referendums to tie to the municipal race on equalization or a provincial police force, Senate elections, I think to drive conservative turnout. Mm-hmm. And so I think those are some of the things at play. We do know Jeremy Farkas has announced that he is running for mayor. He's first out of the gate. This did not surprise me. I think he has been aiming for this almost since he was elected as a councillor in 2017. Farkas is an opponent of Nenshi, but he's also had trouble working with other members of council. So at this stage, he's out first. If Nenshi does run, I think that will keep other progressives out. If Nenshi steps down, I think you will see a number of councillors and maybe outsiders running for mayor as well.
Let me ask you, just speculate, who do you think might run for mayor?
So we've already got Farkas. I think if Nenshi doesn't run, I think Evan Woolley will run as sort of the progressive candidate. Jeff Davison, who was the architect of the arena deal, I think is positioning himself to run as mayor. Jody Gondik, as well, who has both a conservative background and a progressive background, maybe taking on that mantle. So it could be, if it is an open seat, you will have a lot of people running, as you did in 2010. If Nenshi runs, will you see other conservatives with the threat that the conservatives could split the vote and all the progressives would line up around Nenshi? Does Woolley run if Nenshi runs, for example? I don't think so.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. What about any outsiders? Anything you're hearing on that end?
I'm not hearing anything at this moment. We did see Bill Smith run in 2017, and at the time I said that Nenshi was vulnerable to a really strong conservative. And while Bill Smith was known in the back rooms of politics, he was not known to the public. In addition, his background was provincial politics, not municipal politics, so he seemed weaker on the file. But it is possible as we get closer. Typically, we get these announcements just before Stampede so that they can use Stampede week. So it's a bit early now.
Okay, super. Appreciate you taking the time and talking politics, Duane.
No problem, Mario.
All right, that's Duane Bratt, who is professor of political science at Mount Royal University. This has been It's Your Business with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Thanks for joining us today.